So, when did you first hear Make America Great Again? Most people say 2015. Trump came down that escalator and it felt like a movement being born in real time. New energy, new anger, something that had never existed before. It wasn't new. Reagan had it on a campaign button in 1980. Look it up. That phrase is 45 years old and it has always meant the exact same thing. Restore greatness for corporations, for the donor class, and for white working class voters who were hurting enough to blame somebody beneath them instead of above them. Trump didn't invent this movement. He just dropped the subtlety. Everything else was already built, already tested, already proven to work. MAGA is Reaganomics rearmed. Same 1981 supply side blueprint, turbocharged with digital amplification, meaner in its delivery, and louder and clearer than ever about who wins and who pays. Let's run the tape. Tax cuts. Reagan slashed the top marginal rate from 70% to 28% in one presidency. Trump looked at 39.6% and said, hold my tariffs. Dropped the corporate rate from 35% to 21%, the largest corporate rate tax cut in American history. Then layered in pass-through deductions engineered specifically for real estate partnerships, like his. The promise both times was identical. Investment boom, wages up, growth pays for itself. And the result both times was identical. S&P buybacks hit a record $800 billion in 2018, 1 year after the cuts passed. Not wages, not plants, not communities. Buybacks. Executives cashed out. Workers kept waiting. Reagan tripled the debt from under $1 trillion to $2.6 trillion. Trump added $7 trillion pre-COVID alone. $19.9 trillion to $27 trillion. And the deficit hawks who screamed about debt every single day Obama was in office went completely silent. That silence isn't commentary. That silence is the tell. Now let's talk about the cultural architecture, because the tax policy only works if you can keep working people from looking up at who's actually picking their pockets. Reagan ran the welfare queen. An exaggerated story about a black woman in Chicago gaming the system Cadillac style. Didn't matter that it was inflated. It worked. It pointed working class frustration sideways and downward instead of at the people writing the policy. Trump took that same mechanism and stripped every filter off of it. Birtherism. Shithole countries, Charlottesville and very fine people on both sides, immigrant invasions, fentanyl panic at the border. Resentment sells when the economics flop, and the economics always flop for the people at the bottom of this deal. Factories didn't come back, wages stayed flat, but the anger, they kept that bottled, labeled, and ready to pour, because an angry voter looking sideways is a voter who won't look up. Deregulation. Reagan was strategic about that. Trump went to demolition. Over 100 environmental rollbacks. Scott Pruitt, a man who sued the EPA 14 times on behalf of oil and gas interests, installed as head of the EPA. Dodd-Frank gutted specifically for mid-sized banks, the exact category that gave us Silicon Valley Bank collapsing in 2023. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau starved from the inside. Gig workers reclassified as contractors so corporations could shed every benefit, every protection, every obligation to the people doing the actual work. No guardrails for us. The boardroom's feast. Reagan established the philosophy. Trump turned it into a full contact sport. Now, let's put the receipts on the table because the numbers don't lie and they don't negotiate. Top 1% held roughly 25% of national wealth when Reagan took office. Over 30% by the time Trump's first term ended. The bottom 50% of Americans, not the bottom 10, the bottom 50, no, 165 million people hold 2.5% of the nation's wealth. The middle class went from 61% of American adults in 1971 to 50% by 2021. And that movement was not upward. The data shows it was predominantly downward. You cannot run supply-side economics for 40 years and act surprised that the supply stacked up at the top. It was designed to. That was always the design. The safety net. Reagan block granted welfare and tightened eligibility, but couldn't finish the job because the programs were too popular and people genuinely needed them. Project 2025 comes back to finish what Reagan started. Medicaid caps, SNAP work requirements that research consistently shows cut food access without producing employment. Social Security privatization, elimination of the Department of Education, and every piece of it arrives wrapped in the language of efficiency, responsibility, self-sufficiency. But the frame underneath hasn't moved since 1981. Poverty equals choice. Aid equals weakness. The problem isn't wage suppression or union busting or jobs shipped overseas by corporations that just got a historic tax cut. The problem, they'll tell you, is that people got too comfortable being helped. In the wars. Reagan's war on drugs declared crack cocaine, 5 grams, 5 years mandatory minimum. 500 grams of powder cocaine for the same sentence. Same drug, different form, different community. Black men were mass incarcerated while the administration's own people protected the networks moving the product north. Today the war got a rebrand. Fentanyl. The border. Mass deportation dressed up as a drug crisis response. But most fentanyl enters through legal ports of entry. The enforcement targets Latin American migrants, not the corporations that have built entire industries on undocumented labor at suppressed wages. This has never been a drug policy. It is a demographic control using drug crisis language as the moral cover. The labor is the point. Cheap, unprotected, deportable labor is always the point. So line it all up. Tax cuts and exploding debt. Check. Welfare queen to migrant invasion. Check. Union busting to gig economy expansion. Check. Block grants to Medicaid caps. Check. Morning in America to make America great again. Check. 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 Reagan built the frame. MAGA took that frame, armed it, digitized it, and turned the volume up to a level Reagan never had access to. But it's the same blueprint. The money flows in the same direction it has always flowed. Always up. Always away from the people doing the work, carrying the weight, and paying the tab. Watch the pattern. Follow the money. I'm Keith. Use your voice. Start asking the questions that need to be asked. This is Keith Speaks.